welcome to World Crisis Radio, this week's edition coming to you from Washington, D.C., with Webster Tarpley reporting here. The big story, the center of attention and political activity continues to be mass struggle, the mass strike, the fight against fascism in the streets, in particular in the form of the reactionary to fascist Republican governors, but not forgetting the nefarious role of figures like Jerry Brown, Andrew Cuomo, and other Democratic Party Wall Street operatives and austerity ghouls. And, of course, the big news this week, the thing that I think allows us to even have some cautious optimism about the future of the United States, 1 million signatures in Wisconsin. 1 million signatures, a magnificent effort. The highest percentage of the eligible voters of any state in the United States that have ever been collected to knock the fascist Walker out of the box, despite all of his money from the parasitical and reactionary Koch brothers, who put on airs and called themselves the Kochs. But those Koches and all of their related forces, I'm sure Richard Mellon Scaife, if he's still active, is joining in, and the entire constellation and universe of reactionary institutes, think tanks, the Heartland Institute, and all the rest of them. In other words, the people who bought up the Tea Party, they paid their money for the Tea Party and bought it lock, stock, and barrel, and now they're mobilizing their forces against working people in Wisconsin. Well, 1 million signatures. Now, that is a real sign of the times. It shows that the mass strike that started in Wisconsin about a year ago continues and indeed is growing as a social phenomenon. And I talk to people, all sorts of people who are in despair, and they say, oh, I'm in despair. I'm turning to Ron Paul out of despair. Well, don't. Turn to mass struggle. Turn to the mass strike. The one new thing that we've seen last year, 2011, marks the rebirth of the mass strike process, the old mole, which had been underground, but now it's back above ground. This is the first time in 40 years or so. And again, in my experience, since various student upsurges of the early 1970s, but really since the General Electric strike of 1969 and similar events. Anyway, it's something that has been out of the picture for many, many decades and is now back. Remember, the labor movement, of course, smashed by Reagan, the union buster, in the early 1980s. Now, at the same time, they've got signatures to recall, oust the lieutenant governor of the state. They've got signatures to oust various state senators. Those have to then be put to the test in a one against one ballot. So this is a tremendous thing. However, you can already see what the danger is. The Democratic Party, those vultures coming in and trying to advance their wretched Wall Street careers based on the effort of working people to gather the million signatures. And I don't have conclusive evidence on this, but let me just cite one Democratic pol, one partycrat who came forward in the wake of the million signatures. And I think this is Kathleen Falk, former county executive of one of the counties in Wisconsin, and she seems to be the highest profile person who is now contending for the ability to be the Democratic counterpart, the alternative. In other words, the counter candidate. You don't just oust Walker, right? It's a constructive vote of no confidence, as we would call it. It's not only is Walker out, but somebody else is in, similar to California. Although in this case, the percentage of signatures is far greater, right? In this case, it's about 24% of the eligible voters of Wisconsin. In the case of Arnie Schwarzenegger going against Gray Davis, that was based on 6 or 7% of the, I think, registered voters of California. Maybe larger absolute numbers, but percentage-wise, Wisconsin is the greatest degree of capillary grassroots mass mobilization we've ever seen. And I still have left libs weeping, oh, I'm in despair, oh, we need Ron Paul. Well, that's just ridiculous. That is taking counsel of despair. So again, we were talking about Kathleen Falk, Kathleen Falk, former county executive of one of the Wisconsin counties, and she appeared, I believe, on the Ed Schultz General Electric Hour there on MSNBC, tacitly approved by Immelt, I suppose. And this Kathleen Falk gets on there, and she's telling you, oh, she's so caught up in the wonderful enthusiasm of the moment. But she took time out to boast that she had gouged $10 million of paybacks and givebacks and unilateral concessions from labor union forces in her county. And she said, we did this in a very civil way. We didn't cause this tremendous blowout. And you can see what the subtext is. Kathleen Falk is saying to the Wall Street hyenas, govern through people like me. Don't pick the confrontationist Yahoo Walker, but come to me, Kathleen Falk, and I'll give you at least comparable austerity without the huge mass upsurge. So Democrats in Wisconsin, don't pick somebody like Kathleen Falk if this $10 million of gouging is really her claim to fame. She's got to explain that. I don't know what assurances you could get from a hack like this, but where's your candidate? Are you just going to fall back on the discredited Democrats? Remember, the Democrats have gotten you into this position, right? When the Walker assault emerged, the Democrats immediately said, "Oh, and by the way, we're giving up on all the material demands. We can't fight back on any of the money demands that Walker is making. We are only going to fight for trade union demands." And at that point, the devil's advocate would say, "So you're fighting for trade union bureaucrats and not for the actual standard of living of the workers." We need actual economic life and death, economic survival demands for working people in this crisis. And Kathleen Falk, here seen by me from a distance based on one interview and a little bit of research, this doesn't look like the kind of person you want. Rather, let me tell you, Wisconsin, you better get the Wall Street sales tax, because this inevitably comes down to the question, you don't want austerity to be conducted on the backs of state workers and other working people. You want to put the money back into the education system. You want to do the social safety net. You're concerned about Badger Care, right? The Medicare version in the state of Wisconsin. Great. Who should pay? And at that point, there better be an answer. And the answer is Wall Street should pay. Wall Street should pay. And again, it's great to increase the taxes on the top levels of Wall Street, parasites, hyenas, hedge fund managers, the Romneys, and so forth. But when you really look at it, that money is not going to be enough. What you've got to go after is Wall Street turnover, Wall Street buying and selling. It's a tax on trading. It's a tax on financial transfers. If you have the various programs for program trading, high-frequency trading, flash trading, they can do up to 1 million transactions per second with these computer-steered transactions. 1% of that must go to the public coffers. And again, my rule of thumb is 1% nationwide trading tax, half of it for the feds, half of it to the states, prorated on the basis of criteria that can be agreed on. But, of course, it has to be started in the laboratories of democracy. In other words, the need for a federal Wall Street sales tax for everybody does not negate the possibility and indeed the necessity that states do it first. States are the laboratories of democracy. So great. So let's get busy in the states with the Wall Street sales tax. And if you want to do something, right, rather than fall into despair and vote for reactionary Republicans in the Republican primary, my Lord, get out there for the Wall Street sales tax. The time is here. We've seen it. Sarkozy, the desperate demagogue of France, is trying to gain some credibility, some left cover, some populist street creds, trying to save himself with a version of the Wall Street sales tax. He went to Spain, and indeed the even further right-wing candidate, the Prime Minister of Spain, is now also in favor of the Wall Street sales tax in the European version, and Merkel. So back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.